everybody, so today I'm sharing with you a kimono sewing tutorial. I don't actually know, I just call this a kimono. You guys are probably going to yell at me and tell me all the different names that it actually is, but I'm just going with kimono, okay? I have found this incredibly useful in my summer wardrobe last year, so I thought I'd share a sewing tutorial with you guys. It's very easy, it's straight up and down seams, there's no curves, there's no fit, there's basically nothing that can trip you guys up. There are one or two ways to make it even easier than what it is. I have bound my neckline along here. I made my own binding really quickly with a binding mechanism that I have. If you guys don't have a binding mechanism, you can just buy some binding from the shops and bind this edge. I include it in the video so you can see, but if this is a little bit too tricky for you, if you're a beginner, then just overlock it and top stitch the neckline like I've overlocked and top stitched everywhere else, like at the hem at the bottom and the side and the sleeves and all of that. So you can go ahead and do that if that's a little bit too difficult. I am really excited because I figured out a way for me to get a pattern to you guys wherever you live, which might sound really silly, but honestly for like the last 3 years since I started doing tutorials, I've been trying to figure out a way that I can get a pattern to you that's free and that does, I don't have to use like I don't know how to use CAD. CAD is like a application you use on computers. It's like a drawing application, and you can draw patterns, like garment patterns on there. I don't have CAD, don't know how to use it, so I've been trying to figure out a way, and you guys aren't gonna have CAD either. Anyway, so I've been trying to figure out a way to get a pattern to you guys, and I finally have. I made a blog post about the introduction to it, and then there will be a blog post. I'll put a little link on the screen now. Click on the link and it will take you to the WordPress blog, and that will run you through a step-by-step guide on how to draft this incredibly easy kimono. And then the video you're watching now is like you've already drafted the pattern and it's like done and dusted, and now I'm teaching you how to construct the garment. Yeah, that might sound really like cool, you figured out how to get a pattern to me, but actually really tricky. So you don't have to have special drafting paper or anything, you just need a ruler, a pen and some paper. You can even use newspaper or baking paper, or I go to IKEA and I buy the paint roll paper that they have for kids paintboard things. So that's $7 from IKEA. Everyone has an IKEA near them. Failing that, newspaper is great. I feel like I'm forgetting stuff. I think that's everything. Apologies for the mess. I got a new sewing machine, and my studio is just full of stuff. If this video gets 200 thumbs up, which it won't, but if it does, then I'll film a, what's that thing? Studio tour. Lol. Yeah, it's nice to be back and filming tutorials for you guys. I just wish like I had more to talk to you guys about, so we have like a rambly video, which pretty much all of my videos are, just like talking to you. Yeah, that's everything. I'm gonna be quiet now. Let's jump into the sewing part of the tutorial. So this is just a really quick overview of my finished pattern. I hope you guys found the drafting pretty easy. There's a bunch of information on that drafting page, so some of this might seem a little bit overwhelming in the initial process, but yeah, just check out the blog post and that has like really detailed information on what the heck is going on. But that was my pattern. Now I'm moving on to laying out my fabric. I used about 3 meters of fabric, but basically you want double the length of your garment, so enough for the front and enough for the back. I'm folding my fabric good side to good side, salvage together, and then I'm placing my first pattern pieces down. So I start with the center back on the fold, which is what I'm cutting out right now. And then I'll move on to my sleeve pattern, and I'll move on to my center front pattern. So the most important thing you guys need to remember at this stage is if it's cut on the fold or if it's not cut on the fold, and also cutting in my notches, as you can see me doing here. A notch is just a point of reference that you will need to come back and use later on. Those notches there are a reference to the side seam, where it starts and where it finishes. When you cut in a notch, you don't want to cut into the fabric any more than 5 mil. If you cut in like a centimeter, you're cutting through all of the seam allowance, if that makes sense. So just snipping in just a little bit. You could put a pin in instead of cutting in, but I prefer to cut because sometimes the pins drop out. Yeah, so cutting out all my pattern pieces, that is done and dusted. The next step will be laying my patterns out flat, taking all my pins out and laying the garment up, basically. I like to do this on a really wide flat surface so I don't get confused with the top or the bottom or the front or the back. You can see how I'm working here. And then when I start actually pinning, I like to work from the top of the garment down. So I'll always work from the shoulders, and then I'll do the side seams and then any other seam I need to do on the garment. That way you just don't get confused and you don't miss a seam. So yep, I'm pinning all of that now, and then I will move on to pinning my sleeve pattern. Just to clarify, the sleeve seam that we're pinning and stitching first is the opposite edge to our folded top edge. So the shoulder seam is pretty self-explanatory where that sits, but the side seam sits between the two notches that we made. So the bottom edge is still left open. This is just a little layup of where everything is going to be seamed together. My underarm seam, my side seam, my shoulder seam, and then there will be a sleeve seam where I join the sleeve pattern to the garment. So hopefully that makes sense. The bottom is left open, then we've got a side seam, and then the sleeve is attached. Now we're going to jump right into sewing the actual garment. So I'm going to sew both of my sleeves, the parts that I pinned, both of my shoulder seams, obviously not at the same time, like I'll stitch one shoulder and then the next shoulder. And now I'm coming on to my third seam, which is my side seam between those two notch points. Whenever you're stitching something, remember to backstitch at the beginning and again at the end. Our seam allowance is 1 centimeter, don't forget. I'm just going to overlock my sleeve, the entirety of both of my sleeves. So I start with the seam that we just stitched, overlocking that edge, and then I'm going to come and overlock the bottom edge of the sleeve and the top edge of the sleeve, just so stuff don't fray. Now I'm coming in and overlocking my shoulder, and then I will come back and overlock, as you can see here, I'm opening up my armhole, and I'm overlocking that seam, that armhole opening, working from the shoulder seam down to the hem. This will make more sense once you've actually gotten to this stage. So I need to overlock my side seams open, obviously because the bottom of the kimono is open. So I can't overlock them together, otherwise it'll just be like a side seam all the way down. Yeah, so overlocking both of those. If you don't have an overlocker, you can just do a zigzag stitch on the machine, on your sewing machine, and that will encase. The reason why we overlock is so that things don't fray. And once you've done that, come back in and overlock the hem of the garment. So that was the center back just there. I did the side just there as well. Now, a lot of people don't do this, but pressing, like ironing your seams, does so much for the garment. It just helps everything to sit nice and flat. So I'm overlocking? I'm pressing everything that I just overlocked. And now I'm coming in and joining my sleeve pattern together. So working from my side seam and the seam of my sleeve. That is the first point of reference. I pin those two edges together, and then I come back and I pin the rest of the sleeve around together. It's basically a big hole, you'll see, in the sleeve in. Don't forget to pin it so it's good side to good side, so you haven't got your seam allowance sticking out. I've done that before. But yeah, so that's what the sleeve will look like once you've pinned it together, and then we come in and stitch that. And that's why it's important to overlock everything separately, just because it makes it a little bit easier than coming back and trying to overlock it all at the end. But yeah, if you guys need to, that's what it looks like. That's the sleeve. That's it finished. If you guys need to, just come back and watch this again when you come to sew it, because you might forget some details. But I'm just stay stitching the neck here. A stay stitch is just 1 centimeter in from the edge, and it's just a straight stitch, and that'll just stop the fabric from warping around by the neck. This is the binding that I used. Again, if you guys don't want to bind like I'm doing here, you can just overlock that neck edge and then just top stitch it. But because I'm annoying, I like binding. I like the finish that it gives. So the garment is laid so the good side of the fabric is sitting up, and I'm placing the good side of the binding towards the top edge of the fabric, along that neck edge, which starts down at the hem, works all the way up across the bust, around the neck, and then back down. Again, this will make more sense once you've actually started sewing the garment and you've got it laid in front of you. If you don't have a bias binding mechanism, then you can just buy bias binding tape that's similar, that matches the fabric that you're working with. So pin all of that in place. That's the underside of the neck edge, and that's the top side of the neck edge, if that makes sense, how to pin bias binding. Yeah, and then we're going to go ahead and stitch that in place. So that is, I've pinned that 1 centimeter in. So you stitch in the ditch now of the folded edge of that bias binding, remembering to back stitch at the beginning. You can also see I've left a little bit of binding at each end. I'm just going to need to edge that, so that's why I haven't started the bias binding right at the end of the garment. This can take a little while. Well, I like to take my time with binding. There's no point in rushing it, because the worst thing is to have to come and unpin it because it's bunched underneath. So just take your time when you're stitching the binding, if you do stitch the binding down. And then the next thing we're gonna do is, oh yeah, the sleeve. I forgot about this. So yeah, it's all been overlocked and pressed, which is great. So now I'm just folding up the overlocking of my sleeve edge and top stitching it down from the inside. So that's what you could do with the neckline if you want an easier way of doing it. So I'm just finishing all the edges now, so my sleeve and my side seams. Top stitching is like a really easy, quick, and I find a nice way of finishing edges. Don't forget that our seam allowance here is 1 centimeter, so we're folding that overlocked edge over by about 1 centimeter. You don't have to be too perfect or precious with that. It's just roughly done. Back stitching at the top and at the end, and then coming in and giving it a press. Honestly, you probably saw just there, the fabric was sitting a bit warped. As soon as you press it looks so much better. Now I'm coming in and working with my neck edge, my bound edge. I'm just pressing that, so the seam allowance is all sitting the same way, and it's really important to trim back down to 0.5 centimeters, that raw edge of the binding on the inside. It makes it really easy to do this next step, which is to fold it over. So the edge you see right there is the outside, the good edge, the top edge. And as you can see, it's still open. I've just pressed it, I haven't top stitched it. And now I'm coming in, trimming off the excess of that binding that we left, edging that, as you can see. When I actually come to top stitching this in place, I have the good side of the fabric up, and I'm stitching that bound edge no less than 2 millimeters in. If I was to stitch 1 millimeter in from the edge, I may not catch that underside of the binding, which we just pressed in place. So 2 to 3 mils in from that seamed bound edge will make sure that we definitely catch the underside. The reason why I like to top stitch is because you get a nicer finish if you stitch from the outside. So that's the neck completely done. The last thing we need to do is hem the garment. So I'm just flipping up my top stitching. I'm flipping up my overlocking, and top stitching that in place. I like to do this from the inside because I use the foot and the overlocking as a guide. I'm just folding the corners in of each edge of my hem, as you can see there. I'm just folding the corner end of the overlocking and coming back in and top stitching. That is it. That is the last step that you need to do. If you guys need to, please watch the video again and pause it every now and again to check up on what you might be confused about. You can also leave a comment. Thanks for sticking around, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. What did you think? Leave a comment down below. Let me know your feelings. What do you guys think we should make next? We can make anything we friggin' want. We can make a dress. We can make a bustier pattern. That would be really tricky though. But we could make full circle skirt patterns. We could make chill petticoat patterns. That was a popular video. We can make friggin' anything we want we can make now, and I can get the pattern to you guys for free. So yes, I hope you guys are happy and well, and yeah, I'll see you guys in my next video. Don't know what it's gonna be, but we'll figure it out together. See you guys.